Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. Today we're going to be talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, released in 1981, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Lawrence Kasdan from a story by George Lucas, and starring Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, John Rhys Davies.
John Rhys Davies.
Yeah. Gimli. Or before that, Sala. So, normally, we start off with kind of nostalgic look-backs into, when we first saw this movie, but I honestly have no recollection of seeing this for the first time. I do have a recollection of seeing Temple of Doom and Last Crusade for the first time, but this film has kind of just always been around. I don't know, my parents never owned it, but I think we had it taped off TV or something, because, that opening scene with the giant boulder is, number one, it's iconic, but also I just always remember that scene.
Right.
So, and I know I watched it as a kid, but I don't have a memory of seeing it for the first time. What about you?
Yes, I do actually.
Okay.
We had just moved to Georgia. Well, not just moved, but I was, probably about that year.
Uh-huh.
And my dad one night was like, hey, there's a movie on tonight called Indiana Jones. You want to watch it? And I was like, okay. And we watched it, and I remember seeing that scene, and just after that moment, I was like, this is insane. I'd never seen anything like this before. Granted, I was maybe 6 years old, but it was just so unique and so much action and energy in that opening. And I've tried to have my kids watch it a few times.
Right.
They weren't that interested the first time. Watching it this time, my oldest son was sitting right there the whole time watching it with me.
Nice.
But I knew I could understand why they weren't interested really in it at first, because there's so many scenes that are just dialogue heavy and just not really catering to a child's interest.
Right.
The moment that after that first scene when they go to the school and he's writing on the chalkboard, and then they go into the details of what the Ark is, and then he goes off to Nepal, and there's really not that much stuff there. Of course, you have the little gunfight that can kind of be a breaker for kids at the bar.
Right.
But there's so much just blah there for kids.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem to be a problem for me growing up. I always found it interesting to watch, and I watched this movie so many times that I knew, what was happening. I knew what scenes were going to be coming up at a young age. Temple of Doom also was a big part for me. I don't want to go too much into it because, we'll eventually do a podcast on that. But
sure.
That could have helped kind of ingrain in me who Indiana Jones was.
Right.
I actually probably watched Temple of Doom the most out of all three of them growing up. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, I loved as a kid, and I remember that first viewing. Nice.
That's awesome. That's cool that you can remember that, because I certainly don't. But I do, it's interesting, because I think I have a similar situation where, I don't know if I saw it in the theater, but I know we watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually did watch Temple of Doom, but I don't think my parents had seen it before we decided to watch it as a family. And it was one of those things kind of like Batman Returns, which we've talked about, where my parents didn't really care for it. I think they thought it was a little too dark, especially for the kids.
With the guy, they were right.
Heart and everything, right. And so we only watched that like once, and then I don't think we ever really rewatched that. I probably didn't rewatch Temple of Doom until I was an adult.
Interesting.
So I didn't really grow up on that one, but I did grow up on Last Crusade quite a bit. So Last Crusade, I feel like, introduced me to Indiana Jones a little bit more than Raiders did. I think I saw Raiders first, but I loved Last Crusade when I was a kid.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
So,
I watched all three of them.
Yeah.
Pretty much just all the time. I remember, though, I just remembered this. I actually knew about Indiana Jones before the movies because when I was about 5 years old, I got to go to Disney World. My parents took me.
Nice.
Left my sister behind with the aunt and uncle. And there was, of course, at MGM Studios, they had the Indiana Jones show thing there.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it was a live action show, right? Like it wasn't like a ride; it was like a
correct.
Yeah.
It was it was just like a show. And so we were sitting down waiting for that to start, and my mom leans over to my dad and says, "Is this the one with the cup?" And it wasn't actually. It was a retake on Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I remember thinking after hearing that, I was like, "Oh, Indiana Jones. He's an important character because my mom knows about him, and and she's so excited. She didn't care a thing about Indiana Jones.
Right.
I'm surprised she even knew about the cup in the first place,
the Holy Grail. Right.
But yeah, but after that, that stuck with me, and then the movie came on. I remember watching the show. The gunshots were really loud, and they scared me. I had to cover my ears.
Oh, wow. Interesting. I never saw the Indiana Jones show, at least not to my recollection. But they have an Indiana Jones ride out here at Disneyland, and it's pretty fun. It's still pretty fun.
Okay.
You're basically like in a Jeep on a track kind of thing, and it takes you around. I think it's... I don't know if it really follows any one movie. I can't really remember, but if it does, it's more Temple of Doom-ish, I think.
Because of the tracks, probably.
Yeah. Right. So, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite rides at Disneyland.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did, in the show they redid the boulder scene, which was really cool to see.
Oh, nice. There might be a boulders on the ride too. I can't remember. Next time I'm at Disneyland, I'll have to ride and pay attention this time.
What were you doing when you were writing it?
I was reading a book. I
Gotcha.
was caught up. It was a page turner. This film, when it was released, Spielberg had Jaws on his resume, and that was obviously a huge success. And he had a couple other movies, but it was still pretty early in his career, I guess you could say. I mean, he had done a TV, he had directed some TV episodes and done Duel and the Sugarland Express and stuff.
Right. I'm pulling up his list now. Yeah, Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and then 1941, which was not
a success
at all.
Right. Jaws was nominated for Best Picture, and then so was this film. I don't believe Close Encounters was, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I believe George Lucas and Steven Spielberg knew each other beforehand.
They did. I don't know how they met.
Didn't they go to school together?
That's a possibility. I know that they knew each other during the Close Encounters of the Third Kind / Star Wars days, because there's a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a story that George Lucas visited the set of Close Encounters and got really nervous and said, he was like, your movie's going to make so much more money than Star Wars. He's like, this is the movie people are going to want to see. And so they made a bet that Steven Spielberg bet that Star Wars was going to do better than Close Encounters, and George Lucas made a bet that Close Encounters would do better than Star Wars. And I don't know how much that bet was, but supposedly Steven Spielberg was like, and I won that bet pretty well. So,
right.
It's funny because this movie, obviously Close Encounters, I think did well, but not as well as Star Wars, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
and I love Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's a great...
I'm ashamed to admit I've never actually seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's what I call a fine wine movie. I'm just waiting to watch it, special occasion type thing, which is stupid. I should just watch it tonight. But yeah, I've never seen it.
I mean, it's probably not going to be what you expect because it's a little slow.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those, it's just...
I have seen the end. I think it was on TV or something.
Oh, that's the best part of the movie.
And so the whole, boo, 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 boo thing, I've seen that. But I haven't seen the rest of it. So I've never seen like the Devil's Tower.
You've seen a lot of the movie.
Probably more than I realized. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what was going on. So anyway, back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones, or Harrison Ford, I meant. There's somebody comments on our website, which we appreciate, and he's talking about how we should do a Versus episode and talk about how the movie would be like if this actor played this character instead of the actor that actually played him. And he gave us a few examples, but I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about one in particular. Harrison Ford is obviously Indiana Jones, but as most people know, that was not the first choice. The first choice to play Indiana Jones was Tom Selleck. And he was going to do it, but he couldn't get out of his Magnum PI contract. Or Magnum PI wouldn't let him take the time off to shoot the movie. And so I'm curious what you think the film would have been like. Would it have been as good had Tom Selleck played Indiana Jones instead of Harrison Ford?
I'd have to say no.
Yeah.
Just because Harrison Ford is Harrison Ford.
Right.
But then again, here's the thing, you can't go back and say, well, if Tom Selleck had gotten the role, you never would have thought, well, what if Harrison Ford had played Indiana Jones?
Right.
So it might have fit.
It might have.
Tom
Selleck,
know.
I think, and Tom Selleck has charisma. If you've ever watched Magnum PI,
I was getting ready to say I don't know if I've ever seen a Tom Selleck movie. I just know him by his mustache.
Right. Just know who he is.
Yeah, I know who he is. I don't know if I've ever seen him act.
You never seen 3 Men and a Baby?
No, I haven't.
Oh wow.
But
3 Men and a Baby, directed by Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. The late Leonard Nimoy, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Tom Selleck, I don't know if I've ever watched an entire episode of Magnum PI, but I've seen him in other things. I've seen Quigley Down Under and the 3 Men and a Baby movies, and he was on Friends, here and there. So I've seen him act, and I think, he's not a non-charismatic actor, but there is just, like, Harrison Ford just kind of, like, oozes charisma, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Harrison Ford, when you see Harrison Ford, especially as Indiana Jones or as Han Solo on screen, you're like, I want to be that guy. And I don't think I've ever said that about Tom Selleck.
That's a good point. I mean, even in the 1990 Turtles movie, April O'Neil says, "Why can't I ever dream about Harrison Ford?"
Right. Yeah.
He's one of those top iconic actors in Hollywood that will, he's at the top of the chain, and he will always be
during these years.
Yeah,
like right. I mean, he was in his prime, I would say, like in the 80s, and I mean, I don't know how he hadn't done a whole lot before Star Wars, but at this time, Indiana Jones and 1981 through 1980. I mean, even in the 90s, but he was
he was in the 90s too, because he had all the like political thrillers. He had The Fugitive.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I love The Fugitive.
Air Force One. Yeah, The Fugitive is amazing.
Yeah.
He was just one of the top names of all time.
Yeah.
So kudos to Harrison Ford. You're a good actor.
Yeah. And there's just certain things that I think wouldn't have happened. This one in particular, that wouldn't have happened had Tom Selleck. Well, you never know, I guess. But the scene where the guy has the sword and Harrison or Indiana Jones just shoots him.
Yeah.
That supposedly happened because Harrison Ford was sick. Apparently there was a big fight scene choreographed or whatever, and he got sick and was like, I can't do it. And so he was like, what if we just do this instead? And I shoot him.
Yeah.
And so you thinking with Tom Selleck, there might have actually been that fight scene. We wouldn't have gotten that great Indiana Jones moment of him just shooting the guy.
It's one of the best things ever.
Yeah.
And it was an accident, really. Mm-hmm. It's so perfect, and every time you see that, it makes you smile.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of your favorite things about this movie?
I love Spielberg's direction. I mean, it feels there aren't very many movies I feel like that are like Indiana Jones, or at least like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It just has this really...
That's what I was thinking while I was watching this.
Yeah, I was like, it just has this quality to it. And I think, you know, the thing about the Indiana Jones movies is the whole idea behind them was they were supposed to kind of emulate the movies from the era that it took place. So these movies took place in the 30s, and so they're supposed to kind of emulate those theatrical serials from the 30s. And, you know, obviously I haven't seen very many theatricals from the 30s, but obviously I'm assuming these are a lot more exciting because they didn't have as much technology and stuff like that back then. But obviously George Lucas found them exciting enough to want to make something like it. And I think, you know, like I said, there's just not many movies like it. And it just
the character in the universe and the idea of Indiana Jones, like a guy that dresses up with a leather coat, like a hat, a whip, and he goes into temples with vines and, you know, into jungles and fights, you know, Nazis that are looking for supernatural artifacts.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything. I think Indiana Jones invented that.
I mean, there might have been something, I don't know for sure, but I think there might have been something similar in the 30s, kind of like that. But I don't know.
Well, yeah, because when you were talking about how they were made, how these movies at the time period were made like that, I was going to say, were there movies like this? Because I don't know of any.
There's definitely not many that I know of. So it's very possible. But, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's awesome. And there's something else I was
when you
say.
see that now, you know, when you see someone doing these things,
feels like an Indiana Jones ripoff.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
The first movie that comes to mind for me is National Treasure.
Right.
Which I haven't seen for a long time. But
I would even say we wouldn't have the Uncharted video games if it wasn't for Indiana Jones.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of that character in that game is sort of a modern day Indiana Jones, or at least that's kind of how I see it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, definitely. The way this movie kind of came together, I read somewhere that Spielberg told Lucas they were kind of just having a little, you know, conversation about whatever, and he confessed to George Lucas that he's always wanted to direct a James Bond movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Lucas was like, well, actually, I kind of have an idea that's in that, you know, kind of, it's not obviously the same as James Bond, but something similar. And that's when George Lucas kind of pitched, I guess, Indiana Jones to Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
if George Lucas got the idea and the concept of Indiana Jones from obviously nothing, it would have been inspired by something, but it's so unique, you know, just like we were talking about the temples and stuff and what Indiana Jones is. If he came up with that on his own, that's, in my mind, as beyond creating Star Wars. Because with the creation of Star Wars, you already had stuff like Star Trek and Flash Gordon, and you had that concept and those ideas already.
Right.
But for me, Indiana Jones is just, when I try to think of something to come up with an idea as unique as Indiana Jones was, I'm like, where do you start?
Right.
What can you create?
Yeah.
And he did it 3 times.
Four technically.
Some would say 4. I say 3.
We'll talk about that one, I suppose, one day. I suppose if we're going to do the other movies, we should do Crystal Skull.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think I agree with you there. I think George Lucas came up with something really special, and I mean, even the name Indiana Jones is just cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And that's what's so interesting too about this movie is it's not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right. That's how it's like. My Blu-ray says Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but that's not what it was when it came out.
Right. It's just Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I can only imagine how many people were like, what is Raiders of the Lost Ark? What? Of course, they would have said the same thing about Indiana Jones.
Right.
Because no one would have known who he was.
The Temple of Doom? What?
But
speaking on how just cool Indiana Jones is, I actually, the dog actually belongs to my sister now, but I had a dog named Indiana. I named it Indiana after Indiana Jones.
Right, because the dog's named Indiana.
Right, exactly. Yeah. My goal was actually, my original plan was to eventually get 2 more dogs, so I could name the second one Jones, and then I was going to name the third dog the Temple of Doom, so that way when people came over I could say, this is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Nice.
But that never happened.
Well, you're still young.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
John Rhys Davies, not in this movie too much, but in enough.
Yeah.
I love him. He's great.
He is great.
I
think, before Lord of the Rings, there wasn't very many John Rhys Davies movies that I knew of, and so I pretty much only knew of him as Sala until he became Gimli.
Yeah, absolutely.
But honestly, I can't even name another John Rhys Davies movie, and that's just, I don't know, maybe because I'm not thinking hard enough, but I really just only know him as Sala.
Yeah, I think those are the 2, series that I know him from. Mm-hmm. Might be one other, or movie, but I can't.
I know he did a TV movie, an Incredible Hulk TV movie, where he played Kingpin. But that's the only other thing I know he's in.
Gotcha. Speaking of superhero movies,
yeah.
What's his name? Plays the guy at the beginning of the movie.
Oh yeah, Alfred Molina plays.
Yes, who also plays Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2.
That's right. The man who betrays Indiana Jones and then dies.
That's right.
Spoiler.
Adios, amigos.
In the first few minutes. So one of the best aspects of this movie, and it's something that is also a huge aspect of Star Wars, and it was something we didn't talk about in our Force Awakens episode, which we later figured out and regretted, but that is the great John Williams. And,
absolutely.
John Williams and Steven Spielberg obviously have had a long collaboration, and he did Jaws before this movie, he did Close Encounters, and now he's done Raiders of the Lost Ark, and come up with, I think, the Indiana Jones theme might not be quite as iconic as Star Wars, but it's up there for me. The Indiana Jones theme is perfect.
It's absolutely. It's amazing. I was actually watching this during the scene, the beginning scene, and when they're going through the temple, and thinking, kind of the question you asked me about, would this movie have been as good if Harrison Ford hadn't been Indiana Jones?
Right.
Would this movie have been as good if John Williams hadn't done the score?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know. I do think it elevates the movie to another level.
Absolutely. Sure. You try and imagine this movie with different music, you just can't do it.
Right.
Every scene, the music is just spot on. It hits. Even with Marion's theme, the love theme and stuff. It's all part of the movie, and it all flows well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine these movies without that theme, or with any other theme but that. Dun, 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 dun. So, it's awesome. I had a CD when I was younger that was the Spielberg-Williams collaboration or something like that, and it didn't have it only had, I think, 10 or 12 tracks on it. So it was only one from each movie, but it had the main theme from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then it had a theme, which something about the children from Temple of Doom, and then a theme from Last Crusade. They were all 3 of them were really good.
Yeah. Story. What a great story.
Yeah. I mean, to set it in the 30s like that and have having Nazis be trying to find this supernatural artifact like you talked about just makes the villains are so well written. I think like that Belloc character is like awesome.
Yeah,
it's just I think like the guy that obviously Lucas came up with the story, but the person who wrote the script is Lawrence Kasdan, who
and I didn't even know that.
Yeah, who's also a credited writer on The Force Awakens and has written a lot of good movies. So, and then, I've read different screenwriting books and stuff, and Raiders of the Lost Ark is constantly an example of things. They talk about a lot, like if you're writing an action movie, how you want to kind of start off with a bang. And this movie starts off with a bang with that boulder and everything.
Yes.
So I feel like every screenwriting book I've ever read has always had Raiders of the Lost Ark as a great example of different things.
Yeah, I can see that.
It is. It's just like perfectly written.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the villains. You've got. First that opening scene, you introduce Indiana Jones as to who he is. He's a guy that's going and collecting things.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's
and then
I said he's a digger. That's what.
And you reiterate that with him being a professor at a college, and he has all these little things that he's showing. What's his name? Marcus.
Yeah.
And then you've got the government that comes and is like, these people, they know what they're doing, so let's go tell them that Hitler's trying to look for this and see what they know. And and then Marcus mentions it's the biggest thing that you've ever gone after. So we're immediately being thrown into Indiana Jones's biggest adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the supernatural aspect of it. I think that really made a lot of it.
Yeah.
The first time you really see it is on the staff.
Mm-hmm.
When the sun comes down and you see that beam.
Yeah.
There's just something very, magical about that moment, and
Absolutely.
Especially with John Williams' score.
And I like how, the item that they're going after, the Ark of the Covenant, is something that it's like, almost a myth, like people haven't seen it, nobody's ever found it.
Right. It was lost.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so to kind of that I think also gives it a certain kind of, just by like saying that kind of, it has like this supernatural kind of element to it, Right. We're going to find this item that nobody's ever found before, nobody's ever seen. So
I think, not to go into another Indiana Jones movie, but I think that's probably why they picked the
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail for the third one.
Yeah, I think so too.
But it's also Indiana Jones throws out that he doesn't believe in, in magic and all that stuff. So, that kind of, it just gives the moments where you see that stuff happening. And at the end, when he's telling Marion, close her eyes. He believes then.
Yeah, he sure does. That's a scene, I was talking about how I don't have a recollection of seeing this for the first time, but that scene, there's 3 scenes that stand out the most in my memory of watching this as a kid. The first one is the boulder scene from the beginning. The second one is when that guy, they're fighting by the plane.
Yeah.
That guy gets hit by the plane propellers and the blood hits the plane.
Yeah.
That stood out to me as a kid. And then the third one is when that guy when Belloc gets his face melted off.
Right. Oh, his head explodes. It's the guy, the Nazi guy with the glasses that burned his hand. His face melts.
Oh, my bad. I got their names mixed up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember his name, but and then the other German Nazi guy, because Belloc was French.
Right. That's right.
But he's the one. Yeah, he's the one that's like leading the ritual. In fact, it's his idea, and I loved how he saved himself, because he's talking with Indiana Jones early on, and Indiana Jones is like, how do you feel, following your new boss and taking this thing to him?
Uh-huh.
And first of all, why would he say that if he doesn't think there's any magical aspect to it? Because that happens very early on when they first get to Egypt, and it's almost like he's. Do you think he's concerned about Hitler getting it because of the power, or do you think he's just you've sold your souls to the Nazis?
It could be both. I mean, I know that the people that kind of recruit Indiana Jones in the beginning, I think they're worried about Hitler getting it because of the power, right?
You think so? I mean, why else would they care?
Right. So, it's possible. I don't know.
But anyway, he brings up, that, or Belloc mentions, I'm not doing this for Hitler. I'm going to use it in the meantime before it gets to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that moment where they're on the submarine and they've hijacked the boat and they stole the Ark back for the fifth time, and which was hilarious. The constant tag team of the Ark. But he mentions, "Are you sure this Jewish ritual is necessary?" And he mentions, "How would you feel if we go open this in front of Hitler and it's nothing?"
Yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah. So he gets his he's a smart guy, Belloc.
Yeah.
I think it would have been really cool if we could have seen him in some of the other movies. Well, maybe Raiders, or not Raiders, Last Crusade.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe. Not Temple of Doom.
Right.
But then again, you had some cool characters in that movie too that would have gotten replaced with Belloc if he had survived.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that there's another archaeologist out there that keeps Indiana Jones on his toes, and they have a history, and they are constantly competing against each other, was a cool concept. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it kind of keeps, Indiana Jones keeps pushing him,
Right. And he keeps getting outwitted by Belloc throughout this movie. So
right.
It's like Indiana Jones is kind of the underdog.
Mm-hmm. Which everyone loves an underdog.
Yeah. Yeah, bad things keep happening to Indiana Jones, especially when he gets hit in the face with the mirror. That's one of my favorite scenes.
The action scenes in this movie are amazing. Especially that scene where, he starts on the horse and he's riding against the trucks, the convoy, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And then he's being dragged behind one of them and everything like that, and he's fighting the driver and all that. That action scene is one of my favorite from the movies. I think it's a great scene.
I love them, and they're so simple.
Yeah,
and they I don't know if they hold up well because of nostalgia. I don't think they do though. I think they're
well done. Yeah,
yeah, they're just interesting scenes.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the guys during that scene. The Nazis come after Indiana Jones takes out 4 of them out.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the last hope guys in the back. They're like, we've got to stop him, and they're climbing on the side of the truck on each side. And then you've got that last fight with the old, the older guy that goes up top and then comes kicking through the windshield.
Yeah.
Punches him in the arm he got shot in 3 times. And then they do the reversal. Everything in those scenes is just wonderful.
Yeah. And the fight scene with the big guy in the airport.
Yeah.
That seems like a fairly simple idea as well. Indiana Jones is going to fight a guy who's a lot bigger than him and have trouble. And yet that scene's really exciting too, and also ends really well with the propeller and everything.
Right.
So.
Yeah, he had a little help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that has some added kind of suspense because there's that pilot with the gun, and Marion's like trying to kind of beat him up and everything. So, yeah, it's got some good stuff.
Yeah. And I love the fact that the Nazis were the villains in this. Because you have the symbolism of their symbol. Mm-hmm. And the just they are a definitive villain.
Yeah.
So when you see their flag or
the swastika,
there's the swastika, you're like, bad news.
Yeah.
And it just hits you immediately. I wonder if Steven Spielberg picked that.
I think it was Lucas, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. I mean, I feel like, the whole story kind of is based around the Nazis stealing the Ark, so I feel like that was probably
true. Yeah, and with Hitler dabbling, we talked about this, I think, in the Hellboy episode. Hitler dabbling in the occult and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What'd you think of Karen Allen?
I like Karen Allen in this movie. I think I think she plays Marion Ravenwood really well, and I think her opening or her introduction scene is still one of my favorites from the movie, where she's out drinking that guy.
Right.
And I think it's a good introduction for her too. She's a strong character. She's a strong woman, and I like Karen Allen. I thought she did a great job.
Agree. I don't think I liked her that much when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But as I got older and watching it, I was like, she's perfect for it.
Yeah. I think I like her character better than, I don't remember the character's name, but Kate Capshaw's character from Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom, yeah. Yeah, I agreed.
She's not a bad character, but she's not a strong woman type character.
Yeah, she's more of a, like...
damsel in distress type character.
Yeah, she's more of a burden.
Right.
Like something that Indiana Jones has to keep up with and keep safe.
Yeah.
Marion held her own. I mean, he had to save her, but she fought back, and
Absolutely.
she wasn't constantly like, "Save me!"
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. I like the pan scene where she holds up the pan, and the guy pulls out the knife, and then runs in. She knocks him out. Stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, there's one thing I wanted to point out. I don't know if you noticed it. And I've never noticed it watching the movie, but I saw it on some YouTube video probably. It was like top 10 blatant mistakes or something. I don't know. And normally I don't really like to look at movie mistakes because usually it's an editing thing or like it's not usually... It's really not that big of a deal. Filmmaking is tough, and so no movie's going to be perfect. But this one has a really interesting kind of goof. And after Indiana Jones thinks that Marion is dead when he blows up the truck that he thinks she's in the basket, and he starts like drinking kind of by himself in that market, in the background, somehow some guy from, I don't know who he is exactly, but he's not part of the movie. He's in jeans and a t-shirt, and he's like walking through the background. And so everybody else is like in the 1930s clothes, like part of the movie, and this guy just kind of stumbled onto the set and was like, "What's going on?" Just like looking around at everybody, and he's walking around in the background. And I don't know how that ended up in the final film, but it did.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, you'll have to go back and watch that scene again. He's on the left side of the screen. Just keep an eye out for him. You'll see him because he stands out.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a joke, apparently, in one of the Big Bang episodes.
Big Bang Theory? Yeah.
Yeah. About how this movie would turn out the exact same if Indiana Jones hadn't even been in the movie.
Really?
Basically...
how do they...
Basically, the Nazis would have gone and gotten the amulet...
Oh, yeah, you're right. They would have opened
it up, opened it, and then all been sucked in.
That's actually kind of funny, and I've never even thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
But I have something to save that theory. If Indiana Jones hadn't been in the movie, then it would have never gotten back to America and been put away in a safe spot.
Right. So Indiana Jones helped in that regard.
He did. But that's it.
But that's it. That's actually kind of funny.
Something I never understood
Uh-huh.
was when they finally do find the place where the Ark is buried, and they go down there and asps, very dangerous. You go first. Why are they coming out of the walls?
That's a great question. I don't know.
It's just one of those Indiana Jones things, where there's just something.
There's like a mysticism to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I don't think so with this one. I think it's just one of those booby traps where there's a wall with snakes that comes out of it, and you just kind of accept it.
That's kind of what I meant. There's like a kind of like a supernatural kind of almost element to it. Like that's kind of one of the things I love about these movies, but is also kind of ridiculous. Is that all of these artifacts have these like crazy intricate booby traps,
Right.
Like especially in Last Crusade, where he has to like only step on those certain stones because the other ones will like disintegrate.
Right.
And then there's that like it's not invisible, but it looks invisible, that walkway that he has to go across, And I can't even remember all the other booby traps, but they're just so insane that but they're fun. I think that's the whole point. So.
Yeah, exactly. But even more so, how are snakes coming out of that wall for like the past 2,000 years?
Well, how are they surviving down there? I mean, are they just living off dirt?
I guess they're eating themselves.
Well, that could be.
But
eventually you're going to run out.
Yeah.
If they're eating themselves, or eating each other. So yeah, that's a good question. I have no idea.
And that scene when they finally get through that wall and she's like being surrounded and attacked by the skeletons, that always really confused me as a kid. Especially when Indiana Jones comes and saves her and he's like not even paying attention to them.
Right.
I'm like, does he not see the skeletons were grabbing her? Clearly it was just her paranoia and
I think so,
her imagination, but
we were kind of seeing
that
what
always
she
confused
saw.
me as a kid.
Yeah. There was another goof in that scene, I think. I think it's that scene. When Indiana Jones gets dropped down and there's that like King Cobra kind of looking snake. I don't recall seeing it this time, so they might have cleaned it up for the Blu-ray, but I remember on the VHS you could see it. They obviously had like a plexiglass divider in between Harrison Ford and the snake. Okay. And you could see the reflection, I think, of the snake in the glass. And so that was like another goof. You could see the divider, but I don't recall seeing it, so I think they might have cleaned it up. But that was always, I thought that was interesting when I was younger. I noticed, or I didn't notice it. It got pointed out to me.
Yeah.
It would have been cool. I've never seen this in the theater, obviously. It would have been really cool to see this in the theater.
Yeah,
especially when it came out and you didn't know what it was, didn't know what to expect exactly.
Oh my goodness, such a treat.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only Indiana Jones movie I've seen in the theaters is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Right, and I that might be the same for me because I can't honestly remember if I saw Last Crusade in the theater or not. I want to say I did, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That was the same year as Batman, so it's possible I saw it in the theater. But I did unfortunately see Crystal Skull in the theater. We all had high hopes for Crystal Skull, and I defended it for a little while because I kind of understood what they were trying to do.
Right.
And not to talk too much about Crystal Skull, but like I said before, the Indiana Jones movies try to emulate the films from the period that they're set in.
Right.
And so the first three are set in the 30s, and so they all kind of emulate those serials. The fourth one is set in the 50s when sci-fi was huge, and so they made it more of a sci-fi film. And so I when knowing that, it's a little easier to swallow, but the movie still just has so many problems that it's just not very good.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that one.
I think I've only seen it once, so I'm very, interested to watch it again and see.
It's one of those movies that I don't think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'll enjoy it the second time around, knowing what to expect. But I saw it in the theater and thought it was okay, and then I watched it again after it came out on DVD and had a hard time getting through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
At the end, when they're on the island, and you have the moment where Indiana Jones dresses up like one of the Nazi soldiers and goes to the top, and he's got the
rocket launcher.
Yeah. I love that part because there's so much tension there for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone in the movie. You know, you've got Indiana Jones pointing a rocket launcher at them,
right,
and Belloc is like freaking out about not only his life, but the Ark is in danger. And he, once again, he's such a smart character, and I loved his writing and his dialogue. And he convinces Indiana Jones, hey, he knows exactly what to say to him here. He's like, you and I, we're the same. He's already said that once to him in the movie. He's like, I know you. You're not going to blow this up.
Yeah.
Because you've been searching for stuff like this your whole life, especially this. And it's right here. You've come this far. You're not going to do this. And he calls Indiana Jones out on his bluff. And it changes the whole situation. And if it weren't for that scene, that character, Indiana Jones wouldn't have been tied up to a staff waiting to see what happened, what was in the Ark. What did you think about the end result, about when they opened the Ark, about what George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, whether he had anything to do with the choice or not, decided to have in the Ark?
Like the dust, basically?
Yeah.
I actually think it's an interesting choice. You know, it's I wonder, you know, if that would actually happen, like, because it's supposed to be the Ten Commandment tablets, right?
Right.
And so I wonder just if over time they would kind of deteriorate like that, or if they actually in the Ark like that, if it would be preserved or not. So I think it's actually, and I think it works really well because I like seeing Belloc's reaction to it.
Absolutely.
So I think I like that moment.
And for the audience too that had never seen this, you know, they're expecting something,
right?
Like pieces of the Ten Commandments or something else, but it's just sand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the reaction and the effect that has in the audience when they see there's just, to them, sand in here is a great choice to put that.
Mm-hmm.
And how did Indiana Jones know to close his eyes? Like, what gave him that inclination?
That's another great question that I really don't know the answer to. Maybe he was just guessing. He was just hoping, fingers crossed. Maybe if we keep our eyes closed, we won't die.
Yeah,
and he was right.
Especially with him saying, you know, he didn't believe in supernatural stuff.
Yeah,
but maybe he's
just familiar enough with it.
I was going to say he had an understanding of the subject matter where he was like, this was written down somewhere.
Just because he didn't believe in it doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't know about it.
Right. And the Ark of the Covenant had extensive history, so
sure. So at the end of the film, after the Nazis all die and everything, and Indiana Jones is back at the university talking to those kind of government agents, and that bigger guy says, we have top men working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Top men. That is the guy from Star Wars who is also in Batman. Eckhart.
Nice.
Yeah. He just
Eckhart
keeps popping up.
And what was his name in Star Wars?
I honestly
Porkins?
can't remember. Yeah, I think it was Porkins, because I remember thinking it was kind of a mean name.
Yeah, I think it's Porkins.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I find it very cool. It's very cool too to have them wheeling it away and just putting it away to
a giant warehouse. Yeah.
Yeah, that has all these other things that clearly Indiana Jones brought them.
Mm-hmm.
All those other things. No, he didn't. I was joking.
Sorry, I was kind of half listening there. No, obviously, yeah, not all those things. I mean, there might be some other stuff that Indiana Jones has.
Yeah, I'm sure he brought back a couple things, but But what are all these things that's in this warehouse? I like it, but at the same time, I almost feel like they went a little bit overboard with how much stuff was in there. Like,
yeah, it's a little huge. But I was gonna say, it's as iconic as the opening is. I feel like the ending is almost just as iconic. That huge warehouse.
Yeah, it is.
But you're right. I've thought that too before. I'm like, that's a lot of stuff.
Right. All of the stuff is as important to hide as the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily the point. It might not be that all that stuff is as important. It's just that, like, the Ark is now going to be so well hidden because maybe it's just with a bunch of junk.
Because it's just in a random warehouse, maybe?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, that makes more sense. I don't know, though. I don't know
either. I mean, it could be. I mean, didn't they put top secret or something like that on the...
They put top secret.
So, I mean, that's, if you want to keep it secret, you don't usually put top secret on the box.
Military,
right?
It said, I think it said something about the military, and it said, do not open. That's a sure way to keep people from opening. I mean, who's going to open a box that says don't open?
Right.
Nobody. No one's going to open that.
Surely not. It's like, do not push this button. Right.
It works.
Right. All right. Well, I think it's that time, John. What would you give it?
I'm going to give this one 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Stars.
It gets an A+ for me.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's got to be in the top. I mean, I've got a lot of, favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably in my top 20.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of favorite movies too.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's going to be in my top 20.
Yeah. Denise, my fiance, constantly kind of makes fun of me for that because I'll bring up a new movie and I'm like, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. She's like, every movie is one of your favorite movies of all time. But this one really is. This one, I think it would be in my top 20 as well, if not my top 10.
Yeah. My wife does not like Indiana Jones.
What?
I don't get it, but,
That's sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't understand, but I was like, "Are you going to watch Indiana Jones with me?" I knew what she was going to say, and she said it. She said no. So,
man, that's too bad because these movies are amazing.
Yeah, well, she used to watch A Temple of Doom as a kid, and it's just scared her a lot.
Oh yeah. Well, I can understand that,
but I think she finds Raiders of the Lost Ark boring.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to know what you think about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Is it one of your favorite films of all time? You can let us know. You can go to cinemaheroes.com. You can throw us a line on Twitter @cinemaheroes, or you can go to our Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM podcast. I think that about wraps it up for this episode. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading.